In 1996, while magazines and labels sold millions from the East Coast and West Coast war, Tupac was secretly building an album meant to end it. 15 tracks in 72 hours, Brooklyn and Los Angeles artists on the same mic. He called it One Nation. It was 70% complete when a bullet in Las Vegas stopped everything. The master tapes vanished, but the plan was in motion long before anyone entered that studio. A single letter, dated January 1st, 1996, sits at the center of the One Nation story. Tupac's handwriting is sharp, almost hurried, as he spells out a plan that would reach from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. The letter, addressed to Big Lock, lists names like Buckshot and Smif-N-Wessun, Brooklyn's own boot camp clique, alongside Outkast, Scarface, and E40. He writes of a late summer release, not as a threat, but as a blueprint for unity. This was not a vague idea or a publicity stunt. Tupac wanted proof on paper. In the background, a photo from the summer of 1996 captures a moment that rarely left the shadows. Tupac and Boot Camp Clique crowded into a dim studio, a whiteboard behind them scrawled with the words, One Nation. No meeting minutes, no press, just a handful of artists and a promise that the so-called East Coast versus West Coast war would not define them. Boot Camp Clique, known for their underground credibility, became the bridge, neither pawns of New York radio nor Death Row's marketing machine. This was a private agreement, sealed by a handshake and a shared sense of urgency, not by corporate decree. The evidence is sparse but unmistakable. A letter, a photo, and a title written in marker. The plan had moved from talk to tangible action. A summer 1996 plane ticket from Los Angeles to New York, no photo, just a story. Buckshot and Smif-N-Wessun, Brooklyn's sharpest voices, boarded at LAX with Tupac's invitation. Their destination was more than JFK. It was the possibility of a new alliance. Tupac watched as headlines and labels twisted the feud, turning every track into ammunition. He wanted out, not from hip-hop, but from the roles others kept assigning him. Proof came in public, not behind studio doors. On September 8th, 1996, backstage at the MTV Video Music Awards, Tupac and Nas met. Their handshake was brief, tense, and caught on camera. For years, their names had been tied to conflict, but here, they agreed to push past the headlines and work together. The handshake wasn't just a truce, it was a signal. No press release, just two rivals, now partners, in a room buzzing with expectation. Brooklyn's crew landing in Los Angeles made it real. Smif-N-Wessun and Buckshot, legends at home, stepped into Death Row's territory, not to choose sides, but to record with Tupac. Each handshake pushed against the narrative that East and West had to stay enemies. Inside Can-Am Studios, the clock barely mattered. Tupac, Buckshot, Smif-N-Wessun, and a rotating cast of engineers and assistants settled into a 3-day blur where sleep was optional and the lights never dimmed. Track sheets from September 10th through the 12th show session after session, each marked with new titles, initials, and hastily scribbled times. The studio's main room filled with smoke and the low thump of unfinished beats as artists from opposite coasts traded verses and laughter between takes. Engineers remember Tupac pacing the floor, demanding another take, then another, pushing for immediacy over perfection. 15 tracks stacked up in 72 hours, each one a piece of the peace treaty he was trying to write in real time. Session logs list names, Mike D, Larry McDonald, alongside cryptic notes like NYC crew in at 3 a.m. and Pac saying, keep rolling, don't stop. Food deliveries piled up in the hallway. No one wanted to leave, afraid they'd miss a moment. By the end, the walls echoed with the sound of something new, a record built not on rivalry, but on shared exhaustion and the stubborn hope that music could outlast the war. The beat miners arrived at Can-Am with crates of vinyl and a reputation for the kind of hard, dusty drums that defined Brooklyn's underground. In the main room, MP's pads lit up as Mr. Walt and DJ Evil D chopped up samples and layered them over thick, rolling bass lines. The sound was unmistakably East Coast, raw, minimal, full of space for verses to breathe. But this was not just a New York session. G-Funk synths drifted in from the other side of the glass, courtesy of Death Row's in-house engineers. The room pulsed with a new kind of tension, not the old rivalry, but the energy of something being built from scratch. Tupac stood in the vocal booth, headphones on, listening for the pocket. His delivery shifted, less rapid fire, more syncopated, riding the beat miner's drums with a precision that surprised even the Brooklyn crew. On one unreleased stem, just 12 seconds long, Tupac's cadence bends to match a chopped snare, his words landing between the kicks. Producer notes from the session credit the beat miners for drum programming, marking one of the first times a West Coast artist embraced the boom-bap blueprint at this scale. The result was a sonic hybrid, G-Funk's warmth fused with the cold snap of New York percussion. The tapes captured a moment where regional borders blurred and a new language of beats and bars took shape, one that belonged to neither coast but to both. Tupac's vision stretched far beyond the familiar battlegrounds of New York and Los Angeles. In his own handwriting, the One Nation letter lists not just Brooklyn's finest, but Southern names that few on the coast would have expected: Outkast from Atlanta, Scarface from Houston, E40 from the Bay. The letter's lines are matter of fact, no flowery language, just a roll call of artists who, if brought together, could flip the entire script on what a hip-hop alliance looked like. He sent a faxed invitation to Scarface's label, a formal gesture in an industry where most collaborations started with a phone call or a handshake. Outkast's Andre 3000 would later recall a brief conversation with Tupac's camp, a call that hinted at a new kind of unity, one that could draw in the South as a third pillar, not just a bystander in a feud between the two coasts. The plan was to take One Nation on the road to Atlanta and Houston and record with artists who had built their own empires outside the East and West binary. This was not just about squashing a beef. Tupac was recruiting voices that had never been part of the war in the first place, aiming to build a coalition that would make the old lines meaningless. The ambition was national, not regional, and with every new name added to the list, the project threatened to upend the power structures that labels and magazines had spent years cementing. As the invitations went out, the sense of possibility grew, but so did the pressure from those who preferred the war to peace. Inside Death Row's offices, a memo circulated in the fall of 1996, stamped with the names Suge Knight and attorney John Stewart. The language was blunt. We cannot afford a peace project that jeopardizes Death Row's market positioning. The brief, according to Billboard's reporting, warned against giving East Coast artists equal billing, arguing it would dilute the label's hard-won identity. The document didn't just question the project's direction, it threatened to pull studio time if the sessions continued. Senior executives added their signatures, making it clear this wasn't just one man's opinion. The memo's existence, confirmed by its watermark and later cataloged in UCLA's special collections, served as a quiet blockade. There was no press release, no confrontation, just a paper trail that made it nearly impossible for the One Nation sessions to get official backing. The pressure from above was silent but absolute, leaving the artists in the studio to push forward with no safety net. On September 7, 1996, everything came to a halt. The Las Vegas shooting left more than questions about Tupac's life. It cast a shadow over the One Nation project itself. In the days that followed, the energy in the studio turned from anticipation to confusion. Engineers and assistants recall a sudden change. Session logs stopped, and the vault that had housed reels of fresh tracks became a dead end. The master tapes, carefully logged by Can-Am's archivists, were last listed as in transit to a secure vault. But the manifest for that transfer is missing, and the usual signatures from couriers and vault managers are nowhere to be found in the studio's ledger. A low-resolution photo of the vault log, released years later, shows a gap where the One Nation entry should be. Rumors swirled about a white van, a late-night pickup, and a sealed metal case that never arrived at its destination. No official chain of custody exists for those masters after that week. The project, nearly finished, was left in limbo, its physical proof lost in a haze of paperwork and unanswered questions. By the summer of 2000, fragments of One Nation began to seep into the digital underground. The first confirmed leak, MD5, D3B073884D11, 3EDE49, EAA6, 238AD5FF00, surfaced on June 12th, posted anonymously to a bootleg forum, and quickly mirrored across early file-sharing networks. Fans, hungry for any trace of Tupac's Lost Peace album, traded low bitrate rips comparing snippets and waveforms in sprawling Reddit threads. Each new appearance sparked debates over authenticity, with metadata sleuths tracing the files back to DAT. Copies rumored to have escaped Death Row's vaults before the masters vanished. The music traveled without liner notes or context, stripped of its original purpose and scattered across mixtapes and YouTube compilations. For some, these leaks kept the spirit of unity alive. For others, they only deepened the sense of loss. What remains is incomplete, a patchwork of verses and beats, a digital ghost of the alliance Tupac once imagined.